Okay, Chair, we're live on YouTube, so I'll hand back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just wait for the little message to say we are recording. Or we're not. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual consultative scrutiny committee meeting on the 3rd of March 2022. I am your chair, Councillor Tom Wright, and Councillor Councillor Eleanor Rylance will be my deputy chair, as the nominated deputy chair, Councillor Val Ranger, has sent her apologies. I would also like to welcome everyone watching the meeting via the live streaming, and a special welcome to Councillor Tony Woodward, who is a member joining the committee this evening. Based at the decision of our council meeting on the 8th of December, where members voted in favour of the continuation of virtual meetings until the 11th of May, I would like to remind both members and public attending or watching that this council has delegated much of its decision-making power to our senior officers. This is due to concerns relating to COVID risk. Consequently, this meeting is being held remotely and on a consultative basis only. But we will continue to adhere as closely as possible to the procedural rules detailed in our Constitution. The meeting can be viewed live online and will be recorded. Please bear this in mind throughout the meeting. Therefore, may I remind colleagues to be careful with their language and that the code of conduct applies throughout the meeting. We reserve the right to remove and any participant disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any devices off, any telephone devices off or to silent. As this consultative scrutiny committee meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your phones, and when you hear your name called, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Sarah will now do the roll call of committee members. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
Yes, I'm here, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Bruce.
I'm here, Sarah, and Chair, I may need to leave the meeting in about an hour. I've got 2 other meetings to attend.
Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Present, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCollum.
Present, thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. Councillor Parr.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Rylance.
Present, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward. Councillor Woodward? No. Councillor Tom Wright.
Thank you. That means I'll have to welcome Councillor Woodward on another occasion. Thank you very much. Item number 1 is public speaking. I understand we have none. Is that right, Sarah?
That's correct, Chair, yeah.
Thank you very much. Item number 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which is page 3. Has anybody got any comments they wish to make concerning the minutes of the previous meeting? I see no hands, so I accept that those minutes are approved and accepted. Thank you. Agenda item 3 is apologies. Sarah, again, can I leave this to you?
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Bonetta, Councillor Coleman, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Ranger.
Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item number 4 is declarations of interests. When your name is called, please state your declaration, including which agenda item your declaration relates to. If it is a personal or prejudicial declaration, and state what exactly the interest is, please. I'll now hand over to Sarah to do the roll call for declarations. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
No, Sarah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bruce. Councillor Bruce, do you have any declarations, please? I think he's still on mute. I'll come back to Councillor Bruce. Councillor Chapman.
Not that I'm aware, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
None that I'm aware of, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
None that I'm aware of, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor McCollum.
None that I'm aware of, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Parr.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rylance.
None that I'm aware of, thanks.
Thank you. Is Councillor Woodward joined the meeting yet? No, I don't think so. And Councillor Wright.
None, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. And if I could just come back to Councillor Bruce, please.
None that I'm aware of, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. I'm not aware of any. Is that correct, Sarah?
That's correct, yes.
Agenda item 6 is confidential or exempt items. There are no confidential or exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. Agenda item 7, decisions made by Cabinet, including portfolio holders, by members for scrutiny in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedures. There are no items to consider under this item. Agenda item 8, we now come to the main item on the agenda this evening. And before we start the debate, I would like just to make a comment or two. We all know why the move to review the process of appointing former councillors to become honorary aldermen was raised. The conviction of a former councillor, I will not mention his name, who had been appointed an honorary alderman in December 2019. He was convicted of the most abominable crimes that shocked and shamed us all. Those atrocities were reflected in a very lengthy and totally justified sentence he received at Exeter Crown Court. I know we all have great sympathy for those young men who suffered at his hands, and we will all support and echo the views expressed by our colleagues at previous meetings and be moved by the letter of one of the victims that was read out so movingly at a recent council meeting. I stressed whilst we should have the feelings, the suffering and the long-lasting impact on the lives of those vulnerable victims at the front of our minds, we are here to consider what we can do to improve the system by which such future appointments are made. And indeed, firstly, to consider whether such appointments, which reflect earlier times, are still relevant. Please keep any comments relevant to the recommendations as set out on the agenda. Item 4.1a poses a fundamental question as to the need for such appointments. But if that is the decision of this committee, we will need to further consider points 4.1b to e, as should the council decide to continue to appoint honorary aldermen, it would value our recommendations on how we think we should proceed. There is no doubt that for many years the decisions were just rubber stamped by the extraordinary meetings of the council, which were held prior to our December meeting. But the proposed nominations were circulated to all councillors prior to those meetings, and I have been told there has never been a vote against any of the nominees. I know that the term alderman or men seems totally out of date with current thinking, but we consider what words should be used to designate such appointments when the other decisions have been agreed. So having said that, we will move on to the debate, the item. You'll have all seen the report, and I hope looked at the accompanying documents which set out what has happened in the past. And first of all, I will invite, I don't propose to go through those. Have we an officer here? Anita, are you presenting it, or are we just taking the report to consider as it stands?
Chair, the Chief Executive's here.
Oh, sorry, Chief Executive Mark, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
I possibly blended into the background of my card, and who knows. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have prepared a report for committee on the back of the questions that were posed at the committee's meeting in December of last year. And if you're at page 11 of your agenda papers, you can see the main body of my report. So the first question that was posed was how have honorary aldermen been selected in the past? What criteria are used and on whose recommendation? And you can see our procedure, which I would describe as somewhat informal, perhaps, that we've adopted hitherto. And then if you go further down the page and you start to look into the detail of what does it mean in terms of the considerations that should be taken into account regarding appointing an alderman, then you can see that the statutory definition refers to the word eminent. It doesn't refer to meritorious, just refers to the word eminent. And that then raises the question of what does eminent actually mean? I've taken a definition. I appreciate that normally you take definitions from the Oxford English Dictionary, but on the internet these days, that's a paywall. I couldn't get it. And it's probably a shocking sign of the times that I don't actually have a dictionary in the house that I could find. So I've used the Cambridge English Dictionary definition, which is as good as any, I think. I think, if you take that one, you have the simple proposition that the councillors meeting to decide on a nomination should be satisfied that the nominees have provided important services to the council and are consequently respected by their former colleagues, oblique present councillors. So we can come back to that later, because I think what I have found in going through various protocols on the web, there is a lot of local interpretation, if you like, of what the word eminent means. The committee then asked for a breakdown of by party and qualification of those who've received the honour in the past 12 years. I have to admit, I didn't restrict myself to 12 years. I went back to 2003, mainly because I've got personal knowledge, if you like, of those decisions that were taken, since 2003. And I have to say, it was an interesting exercise, and I sort of remembered quite fondly some of the councillors whose names appeared on the record of aldermen. And you can see also the political breakdown. So 30 Conservatives, 8 Liberals, Liberal Democrats, and 4 Independents. And then, as you suggested already, Chair, to sort of the meat of the report is on page 12, paragraph 4.1, a number of considerations for the committee to debate. The questions I've posed are: A, whether to recommend that no future honorary alderman should be appointed. Clearly, that's a matter for debate. I didn't have the time, although I was tempted to actually go back to the original 1972 Act and try and find out from Hansard why that was in the 1972 Act. I imagine it was a rollover of some previous statutory enactment, and it would have been interesting to have actually found, if there was any debate about it, why the thinking around why it was kept in. Having said that, there's clearly a decision or a recommendation for this committee to consider with regard to that. And then I guess B through to E, a number of considerations. And I guess if you take those questions in conjunction with the referenced examples of protocols from other areas that I've included in the appendices to my report, I think you sort of come down to some key sort of criteria which seem to be common. So one is, a minimum term is actually stated. My memory says that when I joined the council in 2003, we broadly worked on the basis of 16 years. So, 4 terms, if you like. But then that was altered when some councillors retired, decided not to stand for election, and it was felt that notwithstanding the length of time they hadn't been a councillor, they had nevertheless provided significant and important service to the council. But it seems to be a common factor that there should be a minimum term stated, and it could be 8 years, as you'll see from one of the protocol, could be 20 if you look at another protocol, for example. There is flexibility, it seems to me, in terms of how the word eminent is defined according to local circumstances. So again, that's something for you to consider. But what I do like, if I'm honest, looking at the protocols that I've appended to the paper, is the suggestion that there should be a form, a formal record, if you like, of why a person is being nominated. And I did actually quite like the Bristol one, I think it was, where it suggested that there should be not just a form, but also signed by at least five councillors, wanting to nominate that particular individual. And then related to that, I think then is a process whereby, whether it's a formal subcommittee, but some sort of grouping, which means that those nominations are formally considered, and then a recommendation actually comes through from that group to council, if you like. And I think that clarifies procedure, certainly. Happy to talk through that in some more detail if you want. And then the further questions I posed is R&E. We have this local practice of including a car parking permit for honorary aldermen. That may or may not be something you want to consider. And then last but not least, are there any other relevant matters? And then the final bit of my report is, although the Local Government Act is silent with regard to the removal of the honour, if you like, I think it's by necessary implication that if something does happen such that the honorary alderman has brought the reputation of the council into disrepute, then quite clearly, council should have the flexibility and the ability to remove the honour. But the process, it strikes me, should be the same, i.e. a 2/3 majority to take it away, in the same way that it's a 2/3 majority to grant it. So that's my report. Happy to answer any questions, but otherwise, essentially, it's one for the councillors to consider and debate in terms of what recommendations you wish to make through to Cabinet and Council.
As you are here, Mark, and also Anita, should I declare an interest? I'm coming up for 12 years, and next year will be my last, I expect. So
I think you're entitled. I think you're entitled to say that any interest at this stage is remote.
Thank you. Right.
Sorry, Chair, I think you're muted.
Sorry, Sarah, have we got anybody not a member of the committee willing to speak first?
Yes, Councillor Miller.
Right, over to you, Councillor Miller. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. In some ways, this report is significant, more significant in what it doesn't show us rather than what it does. We only asked for this report because of the fact one was awarded to a Conservative councillor facing an ongoing sexual offences allegations at the time. We are none the wiser on which councillor nominated Mr Humphreys, nor whether any officer was in the knowledge that he was facing serious questions and could have intervened to advise the nominee that the award was inappropriate while the investigation was live. What it does show us is that the alderman system has been abused by the Conservatives, handing awards out like sweets in a secretive way with no transparency or criteria beyond those vague provisions in the 1972 Act. It isn't 1972 anymore, so the Labour group proposes that we completely overhaul and rethink the methods in which we award these honorific titles.
Thank you, Paul. That's exactly why this agenda
I've got more
here now for discussion, but we do want to address the solution going forward.
Well, that's what I'm coming to, Chair, if you let me finish my remarks. We want to rethink we believe in rethinking the methods in which they're awarded. Section 249 of the 72 legislation lays it out surrounding the title. However, it's a very vague process, and therefore we as a council must fill in the gaps. Labour supports the creation of Honorary Alderman Appointments Panel formed of the chair and leader of the council, as well as a politically balanced group of councillors and a small delegation of town and parish councillors and independent persons. The group should meet at the discretion of the chair and or leader before any annual council meeting. The criteria must also be tightened to ensure the highest quality and calibre appointments for the title. The role of Honorary Alderman or Alderwoman is as a unique award offered to the most hardworking, eminent and respected former councillors. This should be kept that way and entrenched to ensure the highest standards of Alderman appointments. Thank you, Chair. And that's also on behalf of Councillor Bonetta, who sent his apologies.
Thank you for that, Paul. And I think that is what we're trying to achieve, a way of appointing councillors who meet the criteria as set down and are subject to independent valuation. So who's next, Sarah, please?
Non-members to speak are Councillor De Saram, followed by Councillor Arnott.
Thank you very much. I'll leave you to call them, Sarah, because you know in which order they've raised their hands. Thank you.
Councillor De Saram, then. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much, Chair. May I say, Chair, that was a very succinct and moving introduction to this piece, as was Mark's introduction as well. I have been looking at the report, and I particularly look at points 4D and points 4E, as I believe they go together. And looking at this eminent definition, my research, which I've done, suggests that a tribute paid to a former alderman was that they were forthright in their thinking, they gained the respect from their colleagues on the council, and they served their area well and had a great love for their town, or as we have members coming from villages as well. So those are, to me, some of the criteria that we should look at when looking at aldermen's positions and appointments. And I also look at page 47 of the reports before us, where it says the title doesn't confer any special privilege or rights upon the appointed to speak or vote at council meetings beyond the rights and privilege already afforded to the public. The only rights are conferred to aldermen by virtue of their appointment. So I think that if they are to continue, some of the points that we've already touched on as the rights, giving the state they haven't got any more rights other than that afforded to the public, I think is quite important to note, because obviously what we want is people who give guidance and wisdom and at the same time have done great sterling service to the council, as I mentioned. So those are my thoughts on this very sensitive topic, Chair, and I think hopefully the committee will come to a very sensible solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bruce. The leader of the council, Councillor Paul Arnott. Paul, you're muted.
Muted, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Wright, and apologies for the weird lighting condition I'm in. The long story. I'm not on this committee, and we'll look forward to the recommendations from this committee going up to Cabinet and Council. And I think I have a very simple view, really, which is that of the options that have been laid out by the Chief Exec in his thoughtful report, I think it's 4.1A in my view. I think otherwise what we could end up doing is having the most you know, if there's one good thing can come out of the matter that caused this meeting, it is perhaps that we can think in a truly modern way, a 2020s way. You know, how on earth do we have a subcommittee that doesn't get politicised, assessing whether somebody was good or somebody was bad? You know, really, and I do understand how older councillors now, who might have been looking forward to the alderman thing, would feel sad that they're not going to get it if it was abolished. And I do respect that, and I think there are senior councillors from all sides who will feel that. But I also respect them enough to think that they will also feel that we should just really now scrap this, because it isn't a, you know, it isn't an MBE or an OBE. It isn't an honour from the Queen. I think there's a lot of work has been done around the council in recent years to modernise the way we do things. And as I said, this just feels like something out of Camberwick Green now, you know, with mayors walking around with chains of office, and, you know, I know why that still goes on, but it's pretty alienating to people. So that's all really, Chair. It's a very blunt view. I'm not on the committee, but 4.1A would, I think, be respected by the people of East Devon more than anything else. That's my private view. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Arnott. The only thing I would say, commenting on the points you raised, you know, I've been a councillor and I've been present I wasn't present at the meeting in 2019, but all I can say is there were councillors from other parties, not my party, who I might very often have disagreed with, but I nevertheless had a great deal of respect and recognised the worth they gave to their communities. So those are my views on it, but we take your views, and that's, as I say, that is point 4A on the agenda. So I will now invite members of the committee to talk. Over to you, Sarah, please, you call them.
Thank you. It's Councillor Chapman, followed by Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chair. Can I put a correction in, please? Bearing in mind we are on Zoom and this is live, that the unfortunate and horrific outcome of one of the councillors from Exmouth, who was made an alderman and has since been stripped of the title. It has been suggested that the police investigation councillors knew was going on before he was put forward for selection. Now that is totally untrue. No one said anything to me, and having been the mayor of Exmouth, I would have hoped people would have told me. I hear most things, but I never heard that, and I would never have supported it, and I would have made sure that all my colleagues knew.
Mandy, I must treat you the same way.
No, I have to say, it was mentioned online, Chairman, and I would like to put the record straight that we did not know. And if that is clear, then that is fine. He was put forward. We did not know there was ongoing police report. That's all I've got to say on that, Chairman.
Well, I certainly didn't know, but that's not to say not everybody didn't know. Who's next, Sarah?
Councillor Parr.
Thank you. Yes, well, following on from Councillor Chapman, I understood that police investigations are confidential. How could we know? I most certainly did not. But moving on from that, I do not agree with 1A. The point of making someone an alderman is, as the chief executive says, and I actually do have a dictionary in the house. It's the Oxford Dictionary, this one. It's huge. And it does say that eminent means of a person famous and respected within a particular sphere. And that's it, isn't it? It's councillors who have given, who have gained respect, who've served their communities, who've worked hard as councillors. And in fact, I disagree also with what was said about the way in the past people have been put forward. I think para 1.2 says quite clearly that a group leader or councillor nominating an individual for the title has to provide information to support their nomination and a report of all the nominations received with the evidence as to why the title should be conferred is sent to all group leaders for consideration, blah, blah, blah. This was not done just solely by one group. And if you look at the appendices, you can see that in nearly every year, there were, yes, a larger number of Conservative people put forward. That's because there were more Conservatives on the council. There are also many extremely well-respected Lib Dems and independent councillors. And I have to say that actually, I remember going back to the first of the appendices here. I remember I was on the council then, and I remember all the councillors that have gone forward and become aldermen. And I do think it's, I disagree that the members of the public don't think it should go on. I think that in every walk of life, people who deserve it are recognised, and this is the way the council recognises them. And I see that there are several examples included in our report of other councils that do this. And I simply do not agree with 1A. I think we should carry on with, for 1A. We should carry on to have aldermen in the future. There was some mention of car parking, free car parking. I can't see that in the report. Can somebody tell me where that comes up? But actually, I would think that is a very small thank you to give to these people, many of whom served 20 years or something on the council. Right? So thank you. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Parr. Do I take it you're proposing then that the appointment of honorary aldermen should be continued?
Yes, I will propose that.
And is there a seconder for that?
Yes, I'll second that. Mike Allen.
Thank you, Mike. Sarah, any other speakers?
Yes, Councillor Davey, followed by Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Ollie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Actually, I can see that there's a rationale to honour those who've given service to the council. A lot of organisations and even businesses will do this. And I think it's quite nice to have a system of recognising those who've given a long time of public service. And I think there's been a sort of suggestion this has been abused in the past. I don't really think it has. I think 42 aldermen and women appointed over 18 years is only a little over 2 a year. So it's not massively excessive, but I do feel that whatever procedure is adopted would need to be tightened up, and I think it would be good to have a very clear definition, firstly for nomination, that the criteria were very clearly set out, and I quite like the Bristol one. There's a very clear statement of the level of office that should have been held, and I think there needs to be a clear procedure for the names going forward as well, whether that's a committee or whether individual members could put it forward for consideration. I don't know exactly how that should be done, but I think there needs to be a clear and transparent procedure. I'm not sure about inviting aldermen to every meeting. It just usually means a lot of excessive apologies, actually. But I think perhaps inviting them to civic events would still be a valid thing to do. And I'm really very dubious about the lifetime of car parking as well. And I do hope, Councillor Wright, that when you said next year would be your last, you were referring to your time as a councillor and not to your expected life expectancy. I trust you'll have many happy years after that. I look forward to seeing you around Budley.
Thank you for that, Ollie. For a point of clarification, these nominations are only made every 4 years. So following an election of the council, those councillors who might have not stood, or indeed those councillors who are unsuccessful in standing again, that's when these nominations come up. So in fact, it's every 4 years such nominations are considered. Anyway, over to you, Sarah. It's Mike Allen next, you said, Sarah, wasn't it?
Yes, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As far as I am concerned, I think it's good to recognise some people who are respected by the council and have made a significant and important contribution. And we can quite easily come up with those definitions and put them into a formal record and have that proposal assessed by a subgroup. I really don't think that, I think it's rather petty not to recognise good people. Every organisation tends to do that, and it's a shame if we don't. Long-serving members should be considered, and a period of 2 terms would seem reasonable, but on the other hand, somebody may make a highly significant contribution in their first term and not stand for a second one. So I wouldn't want to rule it purely on time served, but it does mean that there should be a tilt towards 2 terms. That really is all I want to say, Chair. I just want to second the proposal that was put forward, and I hope that in a consideration of a mutual respect, which has always been the case in previous councils, that it would continue in this one. I think that having divisions and critiques of people that get petty is extremely to be avoided. It's just not necessary. I've often crossed swords with Councillor Giles and others, but I have the highest respect for all that he's done in Ottery, and I supported him when he last spoke. Just as an example then, I just hope that we would be generous and accommodating towards recognising good people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Allen. Now, are there any, to try and sort of get through the agenda, are there any speakers who wish to propose that we don't continue with honorary aldermen? Any members of the committee? If that's, sorry,
Chair,
Sarah.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Chapman has a hand up, but she had a hand up before you just spoke then.
So, Anita or Sarah, can you advise me on that? Because we've had no counter proposal to continuing, can we take that as that being the decision of this council, then we move on, this committee, then we move on to other items? Is that the case?
I'd suggest you take a vote on that proposal in a moment when you're content that everybody's spoken. Councillor Chapman, I think, has just taken a hand down. I'm not sure if she still wants to speak. And you have Councillor Rylance as well. Perhaps when they've spoken, we could take that vote, and then you could move on to the next stage.
Maddie, before my vice chairman speaks, have you got anything further you wish to add?
Yes, I fully agree with what the 2 speakers have said, that I think we should continue. It is a title, a bit of paper, and car parking. It's an acknowledgement of a lot of work to the community as well as to the council. And I know, as a widow, I was very touched that the Lib Dems put forward my David's name to have a road named after him, which I found very, very moving. David got on with everyone on the council. He was a district councillor, but he didn't hold office because he was only on for 8 years. But I think anything that you give to someone that has spent a lot of time on the council, I think it's nice for their families to know that all the work and time and effort that they have put forward is actually acknowledged. It's not a big thing, but it means a lot to the families and to the people that get it. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you. And in fact, sometimes I know that the families actually sacrifice quite a bit in support of their partners who become district councillors. Eleanor, have you anything to add?
I did have something to add. Thank you, Chair. So having read through all the minutes of all the previous meetings where older people were appointed, I was very struck by the fact that even until as late as 2007, the terminology and the way to which people referred is very, very archaic. I mean, for example, the female councillors are all designated by their marital status. And it just seems like a legacy, from the 19th century that we're carrying forwards at this point, without necessarily having considered whether it fits the 21st century.
Well, Eleanor,
very thankfully, we've moved on from that. But what I'd like to propose actually is that we don't reject out of hand the notion of stopping the older people scheme. Without taking it to council. So I'm just wondering if we can put together a form of words that leaves those two options in, but also that we actually should be looking at what we put forwards from this committee by way of improvements to this scheme if we decide that we might like to offer that as an option. So I know that nobody yet has suggested that we withdraw the older people scheme altogether, but I do feel that it's something that we should put before full council because I'm not sure that's something we should be rejecting out of hand in such a small committee, because it is quite of far-reaching importance. And, it's something that we should all have a good debate about. So I'd like to suggest that we put both options forwards and that we have a good debate about it in full council, and then vote on that later.
Well, this committee.
So I'm willing.
This committee will be making the recommendation to council, and I don't know if you did pick up my last paragraph in my opening address. I know that the term alderman or men seems totally out of date with current thinking, but we can consider what words should be used to designate such appointments when the other decisions have been agreed. So can we have?
It's not just the term I'm talking about, Tom.
Yeah, but
Chair, it's not just the term; it's the whole scheme.
We do. Yeah, well, we'll be looking at the scheme, but can we get to the vote?
Chair, if I may. So I think the suggestion is that you take this vote. That will go forward to you get to choose council or cabinet where you wish to send it. So that perhaps needs to be factored in at this stage where you want this vote to go. That will then be for cabinet and council to consider at that point. They don't have to simply agree it. And as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, I think regardless, you should then go on to agree a scheme for any revised scheme so that scrutiny has had its view. If you don't do that now, you run the risk of that being approved elsewhere and losing the opportunity. And lastly, you have Councillor Ragg, who's recently arrived and has a hand up to speak.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I've missed most of this meeting because I had to go somewhere else at very short notice. I'd like to endorse what Councillor Maddie Chapman has said. It does mean an awful lot to the recipients who have this honour bestowed upon them. And I know that when I was made an honorary alderman, and they, in my experience, they've never been known as older women. I don't know what you want to call them. I know I've been called some things, but it was a great honour, because there are things, as Maddie said, that people don't, they're totally unaware of what you do. For instance, I'd leave home after 5 in the morning to drive to some remote part of Devon. At one time, it was down in Kingsbridge with a hip wearing out, and we had to do a 2.9 mile safety walk. And you know what it's like down there. It's hills everywhere. So it's things like that. And I know that when Steve Ragg was made honorary alderman of this district council, that was proposed by the Conservatives, and that was for, you'll see in the paperwork, his work in planning. He was widely regarded across the spectrum, the political spectrum, for his diligence in planning. I mean, I don't think I'll ever come up to his standard. I'm trying, very trying, but it does mean a lot. It means a lot. It meant a lot to him, I know, and he actually photocopied the citation and sent it to his parents in Leicester. So it does, you know, impact on other parts of the family as well. So I think we should keep this honorary alderman. I mean, the reason it's come up now is because of the unfortunate
Maggie, I might
last year. No, all right, but I'm just saying that is the one thing, the only thing that has made us question this honour. So I don't think we should let one bad apple spoil the barrel. Thank you.
Well said, Alan. Well, the proposal is that this committee recommends that the appointment of aldermen or alderwomen or some similar designation be continued, and that recommendation goes not to cabinet, it goes to council, because this is a thing that affects councils. If it goes to cabinet, there could be thoughts that it is again in the hands of one particular group. So that's a proposal. This committee recommends to council that the appointment of aldermen and alderwomen be continued. Can I have a vote on that, please?
Chair, can I just for the record, can we just check with Councillor Parr and Councillor Allen that they're both happy with that confirmed wording? Just so we're sure. I can see both of you if you want to nod.
I saw Helen nod. Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Sarah, are you going to count the votes?
Yes, will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the vote is underway. And that is seven green ticks and no, 8 green ticks now. Thank you, Chair. No red crosses, no abstentions.
Thank you very much. Having dealt with 4.1a, we now come to 4.1b, how nominations should be proposed. Now, I think someone did mention a cross-party subcommittee. The details of how that can be set out could be agreed. Again, that could be that something council should agree. It's important that this procedure is in place by, at the latest, this time 2023. So there is time to work out the detail. So should we put that back to council, come up with a form of words that a small cross-party group, including the chairman of the council, the leader of the parties, and nominations of councillors on a party basis with a maximum of, what, 7? Would that seem to be a reasonable suggestion?
Shall I just confirm that, Chair? So suggestion is small cross-party group with the chairman of the council, the leader of the council, group leaders, and then additional members chosen.
To make a number of 7, The last thing we want is an even number.
1, 2. Henry's preference is always 10, I think, but that might have altered because of the political split. But we may just have to sort that out.
Can we say 9 then? I'm anxious to have an odd number.
Okay, perhaps potentially 9 or such other similar figure as advised by the monitoring officer. Yeah, it's just this issue of groups and getting whole people onto groups.
Well, that's a proposal from the chair. Is there a counter proposal? I see Councillor Miller's got his hand up. Paul, what would you like to say?
I just wanted to add, I'm really grateful, Chair, for you listening and moving forward with the idea of a subgroup. When I spoke, I referred to the idea of having a couple of independent persons on it, which I think could be very valuable. You know, we have independent persons on the Standards Committee, but also the Bristol City Council model, which I believe the CEO has endorsed, also has that. I think it's a good model because, you know, as we've seen with the Humphreys thing, you know, the public do feel alienated, and many of the public feel alienated by this process. And having lay members of the public, just 1 or 2 on there, I think would give, well, it would give me more confidence in the system. I'm not a group leader; I would never sit on it, but I just like the idea that I think that's the best practice elsewhere. So I hope that that is also adopted, having a couple of independent persons on this proposed subgroup. Thank you, Chair.
I note that, Paul. My difficulty with that proposal is, and it might be easier for a more central area such as Bristol, which I know quite well, is that where should the lay people come from? We are a very vastly spread area with, I suspect some members of the public would have no knowledge of members in elsewhere, and I would actually tend to trust the judgment of councillors as long as they are drawn through our different political groups. And of course, when it comes to full council, that is a proposal that you could put to full council to try and get it amended when it comes up to the final decision. This council merely recommendation. Councillor Arnott, I can see your hand raised. Paul?
It's very kind of you, Councillor Wright. Thank you. So kind of like this is slightly what I feared we might end up with. I can really understand the nuances on this. You know, all of my favourite episodes of Dad's Army have always been the ones where Captain Mannering is trying to arrange a turkey dinner, and they have everybody in there, don't they? They have the warden and the ARP warden and the warden's wife, and there's all that going on, and Corporal Jones, and it's quite.
I remember, Councillor Arnott, they argued over who should make the stuffing.
They do. They're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. Which is why, to me, and I'm not on this committee, but look forward to contributing at full council, and I'm sure this view won't prevail tonight, but just to put it forward, I do think there's a lot of merit in, if it were to be done, then 2 terms, 8 years, that's it. Now, otherwise you will inevitably get into some subjective problems down the line. But that's just a view, just to keep it sort of simple.
I don't want to cut you off, but whether it should be a minimum service is the next item to be discussed under C.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Chair, you have Councillor Allen, Councillor Parr and Councillor Rylance and Councillor Ragg. And I think you're muted, Chair. You're muted, Chair.
I'll call Councillor Rylance first this time, as she was last time.
Thank you, Chair. So I think we haven't really talked about how nominations should be proposed, really. And I think that's actually quite important, because I'm quite anxious that we don't end up with a scheme that just simply rewards long service without necessarily any notable achievements. And I think it would be quite interesting.
I don't want
to
interrupt you, but that's under subparagraph D. Exactly that. How should eminent services to the council?
No, I'm talking about how the nomination should be proposed, and I'm just wondering whether people could put in nominations throughout the term of office if they actually see somebody doing something amazing. So that you know, that was where I was heading with this. Is that instead of waiting until the last year, say, although, you know, just after the person hasn't been re-elected or hasn't restood, if during the terms of office, then they have citations, so to speak, lodged somewhere electronically, they could be considered when their turn's up, really, when they don't get re-elected or when they don't stand again. So that was my recommendation. That was going to be my proposal.
The only drawback with that is that if people don't recommend someone because they are standing again and could be elected, you know, you could be nominating people in the hope that they're not re-elected. So I think that again is something that perhaps, if we are appointing a committee to decide these issues, that is something the process can be decided by the committee. If we're telling a committee how to work, there's not much point in having a committee. Those are my views on that. And who's next?
Okay.
Chair, Councillor Allen, followed by Councillor Parr.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The only addition I would make to the recommendation that's already to be voted on is that there should be a form put forward to nominate, and that it should be signed by 5 councillors. Thank you, Chair.
That's a good practical decision, but again, something that the committee could invite people to do. It could, once we have a committee, it can be timetabled in, as we timetable a lot of other things. It could be an agenda item on a meeting for councillors to submit those forms. And you then said Helen Parr. Councillor Parr, please.
Thank you. Well, again, looking at Para 1.2, I think the most important thing is that we don't have too many people on this. I don't see why we need councillors other than group leaders. And I think, did the chief executive suggest the chairman might also be part of that group? And I just do not see any need whatsoever for anyone who's not part of this organisation to be on that committee, because the whole point is it is the council recognising its own. And so I would not want any outside persons to be involved.
Thank you, noted. Helen. Anyone else? Sarah?
Councillor Ragg, Chair. Sorry, Sarah.
Sorry, Councillor who?
Ragg. Councillor Ragg.
Yeah, just a comment, Chair. At Devon County Council, the minimum length of service was 12 years. I understand well what Councillor Rylance is saying. You might be there 12 years and just sit on your hands. Or you might do something that's
I don't want to interrupt, but the
amazing. No, there was just one exception, and that was for Councillor Moulding, who did 8 years. It's just a comment.
Yeah, well, that's being discussed under item C, which is the next item to be discussed. So we're still on item B at the moment. How nominations should be proposed and decided. I did make the proposal that we set up a committee for it to be decided, which I think will allow members of all sides through their representatives to have a say. Is there anyone else who's strongly opposed to that, or can we accept that a small committee is an open and transparent way to go forward?
Chairman, can you just say that again? Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Well, it's just about the final recommendation to council. I know you, Helen, took the view that it should be just the leaders of groups.
Chair, shall I read you what I've got?
Yeah.
Shall I read you what I've got, which was recommend to council that a small cross-party group is constituted, including the chairman of the council, the chair of the council, leader of the council, group leaders, and approximate to and members to bring the number to approximately 9 as determined by the monitoring officer to give political balance.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I say that, there are times when the leader of a group might fall out with a member of a group who might have done sterling service, but in the course of that sterling service might have upset a leader. And I think by bringing in other councillors, as Helen suggested, will be more fully aware of what councillors have contributed in committees and in all sorts of other ways. So that was a proposal from the chair. Could we have would it be all right now, Anita, for me to call a vote on that? Can we have a vote?
Chair, I did ask, because we are concluding this, that there should be some form of nominations procedure. And so I didn't really want to leave it to a group of 9 people. I wanted to have this committee recommend a procedure.
Well, I think my counter suggestion to that was that if the committee is appointed, that committee comes back with its proposals on how nominations should be put forward for approval.
Who would that be proposed to, Chair?
It could come, I would suggest it comes back to this committee. Can we add that in there?
Yeah, could I just try and help?
Sorry, Mark. Yeah.
So you've approved a recommendation, which is that the appointment of honorary aldermen / older women should continue, and you're debating, as I understand it, a recommendation to council to say that council sets up essentially a small working group comprising the chair, the leaders of the political groups, plus sufficient numbers of other councillors to make it politically balanced around the number of 9. And I think now it's then, if you're happy with that, I hear you saying that council will leave it to that group to report back to council, not back to this committee. The issue then is whether you want to make further recommendations to council as to what that group should consider, if that helps in terms of sequencing it. So you could just literally say, all that's needed from this committee tonight is A, the recommendation you've already decided, and B, a proposal that council appoints a working group, and actually then it will be the working group that will report back to council. It wouldn't normally, procedurally at least, report back to this committee. The issue then to go on to debate, if you want to, if the committee is so minded, is what guidance might you be saying that working group should consider when it decides what the formal protocol will entail in terms of minimum numbers, forms, nominees to the forms, all that type of thing, really.
Thank you, Mark, for that. That actually, when you think about it, is very sensible, because whatever we decide and put forward to council, that will be for the 60 councillors to decide. So whatever format we try and impose, council can change it. So I think we should propose that council set up this committee as we've designated, and then ask that committee actually to further elaborate and define how they should operate. But we can continue to give them some qualifications, such as minimum of service and things of that nature. So from what you've said, does my proposal to set up this committee, and I won't ask Anita to go through it again, would that meet with that aim, which would suit the council's constitution?
Yes, I don't think I would call it a committee. I think it would be a council working group, and that working group will meet, consider probably this report and the opinions of the members on that group, and then that group will recommend to council the procedure that they think is appropriate going forward, giving, of course, the possibility that council may decide not to continue with older men / older women in any event. But yeah,
that's fine. That's fine. So if we change the word working group to committee, that meets that. but I'm also anxious of the fact that we put some sort of time constraint on it, that this needs to come to council soon, certainly soon after, as soon as possible after May of this year, so that by the time we get to this stage of considering appointments in the future, the system is in place.
Yeah, so the recommendation from this committee would go to council in April, and then assuming council wishes to take it forward, you've basically got a whole year if it's needed, but I would hope it's not, but you potentially have a whole year for that working group to come back to council with a set of recommendations for council to debate.
Right, so any other speakers, Sarah?
Councillor Allen has his hand up.
Mike?
Sorry, I should have had it taken down.
Thank you very much. So you've heard the recommendation. I think we all understand what is proposed. Can I now please call for a vote on that? Green ticks or red crosses?
And the voting's underway. Chair, there are 7 green ticks and no red crosses and no abstentions.
Thank you, Sarah. That recommendation is carried. Thank you. Now, item C is a minimum period of service. People have said 4, people have said 8. I would like to sort of have some recommendation that it is 8, a minimum of 8, but I also recognise the fact that there might be some councillors who give very eminent service in that first 4 years, but for reasons perhaps beyond their control, they cannot continue. So I would like this committee to come up with a firm recommendation of a period, but also to have that element of flexibility should there be, if you like, a shining star, that could also be recognised. Now, any speakers on that, please? Sarah.
Yeah. Chair, Councillor Miller, followed by Councillor Parr.
Thanks, Chair. I was under the impression, and I just wanted to ask the Chief Executive whether he's read the same thing. He might not. He might have done. He might have not. That it's 8 years was a minimum in law anyway, 2 terms. I mean, if not, sorry to mention that. That's what I saw. I mean, my view is clear that it should be the minimum possible. Actually, whether that's 4 years, 1 term, or 2 terms. I think length of service is it's about the quality, not the quantity of a councillor's service. That's what I think this should be driven towards. And I think we might, as a council, have gone down the unhealthy habit in the past of simply dishing out the award when you've done your 8 years, which is probably why we had such a lot in 2019, because there was such a lot of councillors changing. There was such a big overhaul.
No need to rub it in. No need.
No, I'm not. I'm not. You might win it back in a year's time. But I was the only councillor to abstain on the vote in that meeting, because we were presented with just the councillors and the list of the committees they'd served on. We weren't given any information for a new councillor such as myself to actually get a real idea about what they'd contributed, and that's the only reason I abstained. So I just trying to make a statement to say I think if we could focus more on what the councillors have achieved, the quality of their service, and not to focus on a length of time, really, the minimum possible would be my idea personally. Thank you, Chair.
Mark, there was a direct question. Is it set down in legislation?
I'm not aware there is any minimum. So it could be a year. Technically in law, it could be a year, but I think you go back to the definition, which is eminent service, and it's important and you're respected. How do you build up respect? Usually that's through consistency, in actions over time. That's why every council, as far as I'm aware, that has published something, does have a minimum term specified, because that way you're sort of saying that yes, if they've built up that reputation over time, then that is why it's eminent service, if you like.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers, Sarah, please?
Councillor Parr, then Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Helen, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I agree with you, Chairman, about the length of service, because I think 4 years is long enough for somebody to prove, well, to become respected. And as you point out, something untoward may mean that they can't continue. And it would be very sad if that excellent, well-respected person therefore was barred from being awarded. I would imagine this would be an extremely rare moment, but I wouldn't want us to be caught out by our policy on this and not be able to recognise someone who hadn't managed to do 2 terms. But what I wanted also to say is, could we please discuss B, because I think it's important that we recommend to this subcommittee or whatever how nominations are going to be proposed. And I do think that every councillor should be able to go to their group leader and say, I want to propose someone and this is why. And then that can be sifted within the group and then the group leaders take it on or something like that via this whatever process is decided. But I do think every councillor should have that right to propose someone. And yes, that's it. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, just to pick up Helen's point, that's why I proposed that there should be a form with 5 councillors signing it with a clear definition of why. But in terms of the period of service, I think 8 years with an opportunity for exceptional service to be recognised. If it's shorter, it's very simple. I mean, you know, 4 years could be just exactly a dazzling star, and should be an exception to the rule. I never believe in rigid rules, I've got to say.
Well, I sympathise with that, but the business of how the nomination should be made, I think the Chief Executive made a point that council can set that. We are talking about councillors making the proposals, councillors nominating, and I think that is something which council could discuss when this comes on the agenda, to say how that working group should operate, because we are a very small representative body of the council, and this is something that council should have more of a say in. But I totally take, in fact, I think I suggested it, that we could, as a rule, say a minimum of 8 years, but in exceptional circumstances for exceptional service, a shorter term could be considered. Any more views on that, please?
Councillor Davey, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, well, I was going to propose exactly that, actually, Councillor Wright, that it was 8 years, but in exceptional circumstances, the committee or whoever it is might want to consider a shorter length of service. I mean, the difficulty is you then have to define what the exceptional circumstances are, but I think as long as people understood it had to be fairly exceptional, then I think that would be understood. And I would like to see a small committee that considers the nominations. I think it would be a more open process, and I quite like the idea of anybody being able to nominate, whether that's through their group leaders or by a form. I think we should have a form anyway, so that there's a clear kind of audit trail here. And that form, I think the Wokenham one has quite a good form that spells out not just what committees they've served on, but kind of why they have given particular service to the council and to the people that they represent, that the council represents. So I would like to see a form. I'd like to see 8 years, but less in exceptional circumstances. And I'd like to see a small subcommittee that then considers those nominations and perhaps decides you could have a maximum number that can be put forward at each 4-year council. I did realise it was every 4 years, and when I said 2 per year, that was an average. But I think, yeah, we might say a minimum of 8 names could be put for maximum, sorry, of 8 names could be put forward at each 4-year council.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Davies' proposal? Ellen, I saw your hand up. Was that just a thumbs up?
Yes,
sorry.
I'd second.
Helen?
Thank you. Yes, I'm not sure about putting a minimum number of people to be recommended. I mean, some years I noticed there were 2 people put forward. Other years there were a great long string of people. I don't think we should have to have a limit on it. I just think it's the criteria of whether they were eminent in their service.
Can I check? Did Councillor Rylance say that she did second Councillor Davies' proposal? I didn't quite catch it.
No, it's just a thumb up. Eleanor seems to have gone blank.
No. Oh.
Sorry, my internet is coming and going. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can now. I think I heard you say that you seconded Councillor Davey, but I'm not sure. No, that might have to be a no, in which case we're still awaiting a seconder, I think, Chair.
Is anyone wishes to
I would be.
I will second.
That's Evan. Yeah.
That's all right then. You're coming and going. So
I'm really sorry. I was really struggling with my internet, so I actually missed half of what I think it was Councillor Parr speaking before, just now. But I did hear what Councillor Davies said, and I really agree with what he said, and I would like to second what he said.
The only thing that Councillor Parr said, which Helen said, which I did have some sympathy, is should we put a maximum number of nominations? The one thing that almost suggests that there should be a maximum number, but we can't all be eminent. I have some sympathy. I do have some sympathy with Ollie's recommendation, and of course it will be for the committee to decide. However many are nominated, it should be for the committee to decide who is granted that award. That's what the committee or the working group will be there for. So we've had Ollie's.
So, Chair, I think we've probably got, if everybody's content, I think we've got an amalgamation of your original proposal, which Councillor Davey has approved or slightly amended, which is that it should be a minimum term of 8 years with the ability to recognise exceptional circumstances, that there should be a form for completion by members that sets out effectively the meritorious service that has taken place, and that there should be a maximum of 8 names. I think that's what we've got for the moment. So if that, and Councillor Rylance has seconded that as it was. So if you wanted to proceed with those, and it will be for council to go over them, but at least you're giving them something to start with, which is probably helpful.
And in fact, that your very neat summing up of that actually covers points B and C.
Yes, we've done B, Chair. I think B was. Oh, nominate. No, you're right. Sorry. Yep, nominated as well. Yeah. Sorry, Chair.
We're lumping B and C together.
Mm-hmm.
So B becomes that, C disappears, then D becomes C, D, E. So we've had that proposal clearly outlined by our...
Yeah. Before we lose it, Chair, could we vote?
Yeah, we chair now.
Councillor Chapman's got her hand up, but I don't know if that was a hand or an early vote.
Yes, Chair. I agree. Apart from the limit on 8, because there might be 9. You know, and that would be very, very sad. It would mean that someone that was very, very good, because they were the 9th person, and you know, we would all agree that they were, you know, they'd done a good job, that they weren't made an alderman, and that would be very, very sad if they'd done, you know, over 8 years. So I don't like the limit. Everything else I agree with. I don't know what Ollie thinks, you know. If you were number 9 or a friend of yours was number 9, you'd be very sad for them, you know.
I saw Ollie nodding. Would you agree to just your amendment, your proposal to go through, but deleting that bit which refers to numbers, Ollie? Would that suit you?
Well, I was simply going to suggest a higher maximum. I mean, that was simply a number off the top of my head. If somebody'd like to suggest a higher maximum, but I still think that in order to avoid the charge that we heard from Councillor Miller earlier, you know, that they were handed out like sweeties, it would make sense to have some kind of upper limit on how many nominations, particularly if any member or any group of members can nominate somebody. You could have a whole stack of nominations and end up, you know, one year having 19, you know, aldermen. So I still would favour some kind of upper limit, but if members don't agree with that, then I'm prepared to concede that, and we can let the committee decide on that, or the subcommittee, or working group we're calling it, aren't we?
In essence, Ollie, the number of nominations is irrelevant. What's relevant is how many are actually appointed.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you could have any number of nominations going to the committee, but the committee can only put forward so many for approval at council. That would be what I would want to see.
Okay, you have Councillor Rylance and Councillor Parr with their hands up.
Eleanor?
Yeah, sorry, I hope you can hear me. I don't really see the need to put an artificial limit on numbers. I just think we need to go for quality rather than quantity, and just make sure that the people who are being put forwards for nomination are actually people who have achieved something, and not merely been present within the council for X number of years. So I in view of that, you know, that would increase the quality overall of all the council, and I think that could only be a good thing. So I don't think we really need to put an artificial limit on numbers, and you know, unless it starts to look ridiculous, really, and we're still nominating like 30% of the council. So you know, I don't think we need the numbers thing personally. So but everything else that Ollie said, I agreed with.
I agree with it.
Delete that bit then.
Because if we're appointing a group and then telling the group what decisions they've got to come to, there's no point in having a group. Leave that to the discretion of the group and the people who are appointed to that group. So can you just, with that amendment, Anita, can you please
you have no, the hands have gone. So that this committee recommends to council that the group adopts, the working group adopts that nominees should have served for 8 years, a minimum of 8 years, with the ability to recognise the exceptional circumstances, and that there is a form that sets out the merit of service that is completed by fellow councillors. We're removing the maximum, of 8 names. So I think that's it. So I think you can go to a vote on that. And that's proposed by Councillor Davey and seconded by Councillor Rylance.
Thank you. You've all heard the proposal. Can we vote, please? Thank you.
And the vote is underway. Chair, that's 7 green ticks in favour, no red crosses and no abstentions.
Thank you very much. Now we've come to the D, which now becomes C. How should eminent services to the council be locally defined? In all honesty, I think that's something which should be at the discretion of the working group. I would expect that those putting forward the nomination on the form, and it'll be for the form to be constructed in such a way as to expect those making the nominations to put down what evidence there is to claim eminence. So I don't think we need to be too prescriptive in that, other than getting the working group to come up with the form, that form to be completed, and for the group to decide if the actions and conduct set out in that form does in fact fill the accepted definition of eminence. Are people happy with that? That actually is almost superfluous. That's down for the group, the working group, to decide. I see blank faces.
Yeah, you have Councillor Rylance and Councillor Allen with their hands up.
Thank you.
Councillor Parr as well.
Who's first?
Am I on?
You're on.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted to suggest that instead of calling them nominations, which suggests just putting forward a name, we actually call it a request for citations, because if you put it forward, I don't know if anybody's ever gone through the process of putting somebody forward for an award from the Queen, but it's really quite onerous, and you have to write quite a lot. And I actually think that, you know, it wouldn't be superfluous to request that people do that sort of thing, that they actually write citations for the people they're putting forwards, so that we actually know exactly what was in their mind when they thought it would be a good idea to put that person forwards. And that's what I'd like to suggest, that we request citations, not just nominations, not names, but actual text.
Can I just come in here? I'd like to hand over the chairmanship to Eleanor. The battery on my iPad is gone.
Crumbs. Okay, it's the blind leading the blind here, Tom.
No.
We'll be fine, Councillor. You'll be fine.
In 2 minutes, I'll be on my East Devon iPad. The only thing is, it won't have the Ukrainian flag displayed. So I'm going to have to change iPads, and I'll be offline for about 2 or 3 minutes, I would think. Okay. Unless you want to call a break during this 2 or 3 minutes, then I'll come back on.
Happy to chair.
Thank you very much. So I'll be saying adios for a short while. Thank you.
So, Deputy Chair, you have Councillor Allen and Councillor Parr to speak.
Councillor Allen, please, could you speak?
Yep. I think that the whole point of defining should be left to the committee to define that in conjunction with the legal officers concerned, so that we get that right. But I have no problems at all with leaving it to be a form that's a form of nomination. I'm sorry, now that you're chair, you have to stand aside for a second. But I think that if you make it a form that defines precisely what that person has done to be awarded this alderman title, I think that ought to be as straightforward and simple as possible, rather than a long essay. What tends to happen in the past is that at the point of taking it to main council, there is usually some form of oration or citation of that person's merit derived from the personal knowledge of the person who usually was the group leader. What we're suggesting is a slight twist on that, so that the person being put forward is put forward and everybody knows why, because it's in a form in advance that presumably is put forward at the committee that's published its minutes. I hope that we can keep it as simple as possible. Right, we've got so many important decisions to make.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. Thank you. Who was next?
Councillor Parr and Councillor Davey, Chair.
Councillor Parr, could you come forward, please, and make your point?
Yes, again, I think we should have nominations, and you describe a citation. I think the person nominating someone obviously will write the reasons why they want this person to be considered. And then, I mean, it may be that several people will nominate the same person, and that will be tantamount to showing that they are pretty well respected. But certainly then I think the group will need to come up with a report on the nominations. I mean, it is all in 1.2, I think. That this report of all the nominations is received with the evidence as to why people think they should be conferred with this title, and then that should be considered by the committee, which will in effect be the group leaders and the chairman of the council, I think, basically, with one or two other people maybe.
May I try to summarise, Councillor Parr? Are you saying that you think the form for nomination should have a space for citation?
I think that if you, as an ordinary councillor, are nominating someone, you give your reasons, and that is the citation, basically. And then
do you not know, is this the case at the moment? Do we know?
Yes. In 1.2,
I don't know the process at all.
In 1.2 of the report, it explains what happened in the past.
Yeah, there's a Councillor Allen was suggesting that at the actual meeting at which people are accepted as older people, then people come forwards with supporting evidence. But my proposal was more about putting that, feeding that into the process much further back.
Yes, it is. It isn't like
Rather
that.
than
I don't think
I
that
just
is.
think it would be nice to have it as a matter of public record.
Well,
that
it
people
is.
are being nominated, what people have been nominated for.
It is.
If
you read the minutes of the meetings of the past extraordinary meetings where aldermen were made, it does say what they've done.
No, granted. But so are you back? Are you back, Chair Wright?
You're muted, Chair.
I can hear his voice. Is he here?
Yeah, he's here but muted.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let's cede the chair back to the chair.
Chair, is it worth me just saying, for Councillor Ryland's benefit, in the previous, the last recommendation, the wording that related to the form did include that the form would set out the meritorious service.
Yes.
Which I think probably picks up what you're asking for, that at the time of that initial nomination, and you may want to push at council that's quite detailed. I think from the views tonight, I think that's probably an open door, but that wording is in that last recommendation. So you have Councillor Davey and Councillor Miller and Councillor Allen.
We'll have Councillor Miller first, as he's not a member of the committee.
Thanks for letting me back in, Chair. I just wanted to correct Councillor Parr. She said that in previous alderman appointments at council, it does list what councillors have done. That's not correct. It's only mentioned what they've been on in terms of committee. So whilst it says that the councillor has served on 11 committees for whatever period of that time, none of us are any the wiser of what those councillors have actually achieved on those committees. So I have to disagree with her that the status quo is acceptable. It just isn't for councillors to be able to, especially at that meeting when it gets to full council, to be able to vote for these individuals, knowing they have indeed provided an outstanding service for their residents and for the council. So I just have to disagree there. Thanks, Chair.
I actually agree with you on that, Paul. I think Eileen Wragg spelled it out, that we all recognised what a very well-balanced, solid, sensible, committed man Steve was on planning committee. And I think any of us who served on planning committee when he was there, he was someone who always said what he thought was right, was always very well reasoned in his arguments, and someone whose views were respected. But that is something that can be written in, that it's, I know some other people who sat on committees, they came, they sat, they went, and nobody really knew they were there. So I do think it does need a little bit more elaboration on why people should be considered, not just merely being on a committee, but what their contribution was to that committee. Anyway, those are my views. And who's next? Sorry, I keep interrupting. I got to remember.
Councillor Davey, then Councillor Allen, Chair.
Right, Ollie.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so if you look at the
it's Tom now. It was Chair earlier. Thank you.
Well, you know, we're all friends here. If you look at the nomination form for Wokingham on page 52, it's almost got too many boxes, and I think this would be one for the working party to decide exactly the format of the form. But it simply says how long have they served on the council, and reminds people that in that case it was a minimum of 20 years. Actually, it asks what eminent services they've rendered. You could then have something that simply lists the positions they've held in the council, perhaps, and then what significant contribution that the nominee has made to the council and its residents. And I think there's a good opportunity there to put in something about, the kind of thing, as you were saying, about Steve Ragg, the kind of contribution that they made when on certain committees. And finally, as a kind of summing up why you believe this person should be conferred with this appointment. So that seems the kind of a good working document for the working party to look at. And I think that kind of pretty much sums up the criteria that we would want to use. That it simply needs to be able to show that that person has made a significant contribution.
Ollie, I agree with that, but what I liked about that phrase, what contribution the nominee has made to the council and to its residents, that could include contributions people have made to their community over and above, beyond being a councillor, because there are some very good councillors do an awful lot in their community, and I think that's something that should be encouraged also. Who's next?
Councillor Allen and Councillor Parr, Chair.
Yes, all I wanted to say was that when I've attended ceremonies where these awards were made, for example, hearing about all of the good things that Douglas Hull had done was actually stated at the time. And I think what we're really saying is that those kind of aspects of somebody's meritorious service should be documented and minuted, and that would be absolutely right. So I'm very happy to go along with what Councillor Davey has indicated, and perhaps we should say to Council that this is one good example for the committee, the working group to consider. But I don't think that there is any problem in the past that we didn't honour these people by saying how good they were. I think the problem may have been that we didn't document it properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. And Helen?
Well, really, I agree with what has just been said. And in the end, the people who just sat there on the committees and didn't speak were not nominated. And the people that were nominated, everybody on the council during their service knew what they were like. New councillors obviously wouldn't have known because they weren't there when that person was there. So it's quite obvious that when Councillor Miller, for instance, came to that first meeting, he wouldn't have known those people because he wasn't on the council with them.
Chair, shall I suggest some wording for you, perhaps picking up, because I don't think we've got a recommendation, picking up a combination of speakers a recommendation that the working group decides the exact criteria, but that this committee recommends or encourages reference to the Wokingham form, which it considers is a good example, something along those lines. So not too prescriptive, but pointing the council in the right direction.
I think that's very sensible. There's no point in appointing a working group if we're going to take all the decisions from them. It's got to, it can't be prescriptive, and we've got to rely on their judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Ollie's.
This is combination of Councillor Allen and yourself and Councillor Parr, I think. So you probably need somebody other than me to propose it, Chair.
Helen, would you like to propose that? Your chance to give us meritorious conduct. Thank you, Helen. Yeah.
Yes, fine.
And seconded?
Oh, seconded.
Thank you. Can we vote on that then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members are voting. And that is seven green ticks, no red crosses, no abstentions.
Thank you. That's carried. Now, the next one is quite simple. Should the council continue with its practice of supplementing the statutory entitlement of honorary aldermen being invited to council meetings and civic events? I think they could be invited to civic events, but every person who becomes an honorary alderman will be well aware of the timetable of council meetings, and I'm certain should they turn up, they would be made most welcome. So can I just suggest that the council should continue with its practice of inviting honorary aldermen to civic events and ensure or sort of make it clear that their attendance at any council meeting will be similarly welcomed. Does that meet with everybody's approval? I can see nods.
So you've got Councillor Parr and Councillor Miller and Councillor Ryland with their hands up.
Councillor Parr first.
Yep, I agree entirely with that. I think any alderman will be as a member of the public in effect, and they're able to attend the meetings, and yes, so they should be, on the other hand, invited to civic events.
Fine. Councillor Miller next, and then we'll finish up with the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the way you've chaired this evening. I think it's been a really good debate and very constructive. I do agree with you about the civic events, but have we made any recommendations on the whole car parking situation? I'm very concerned that we have a blanket policy of aldermen currently being able to park anywhere across East Devon, and particularly with the sensitivities of council, the council having to raise more. I think it's definitely something that's been raised by the few members of the public to me about the councillors being able to park for free on, but they can only park for free on their duties. And I think similarly, wouldn't it be appropriate to have a system where the aldermen can get free parking, but only when they're on a civic event? It just seems a bit wrong it's only my perspective. I just think it's a bit wrong to offer them free parking everywhere. I mean, a lot of people, I just can't support that personally. Thank you, Chair.
The only thing I would say, and I did have some experience of car parking, you can't administer only being able to park at civic events. A situation, everyone who has a parking permit is put into the database, so when our car park attendants go wrong, they put the registration number of a car in their machine, and it tells them whether it holds a permit or not. So I think it's got to be one or the other, and I think that's something that council can decide. I've got no strong views one way or the other. I think Maddie did say it is recognition of several years' service, but on the other hand, we are paid allowance when we're councillors, which goes on to some way to recognising our contribution. Eleanor, are you coming in on that?
I think she might have just had an internet glitch. You've got Councillor Chapman, Councillor Parr, Councillor Davey. Chair, I was just going to suggest perhaps picking up the car parking issue at point F, which is the next point, which is effectively anything else you might want to add.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was just going to point that out because point E is very specific. And I think we've agreed they're not invited to council meetings, but it should be made clear that they'd be welcome to attend whenever they wish to, but they should continue to be invited to civic events. Now, that's what my proposal is. I don't need a seconder, do I?
No.
Can we have a vote on that?
You've got Councillor Chapman, Councillor Parr, Councillor Davey, Councillor Rylance to speak, Chair.
Speaking on that subject or speaking on car parking as well?
Car parking.
No, leave
No, mine's about this subject. Mine's about the subject you want to speak about.
No, just on whether this is just about whether councillors should be invited to council meetings and civic events. And my recommendation,
yes,
civic events.
Sorry, I dropped out and my hand dropped away.
So my proposal is that councillor, aldermen and alderwomen should be invited to civic events and should be encouraged and welcomed should they wish to attend any council meeting. That's what my...
Sorry? May I add a tiny rider?
Yeah.
And that's that honorary older people, obviously they should be invited and made welcome, but they needn't give formal apologies because I perceive that the formal apologies are taking up officer time at the moment. And they, if people don't want to come to meetings, there really is no need for them to give formal apologies.
Well, if they're not invited, they don't have to apologise, do they?
No, but I mean, I just don't think that we should be spending any officer time on processing apologies from honorary older people.
Well, if there's no invitation, there's no need to apologise. So I think we can just brief the officers not to do it. If they're not invited, they don't need to apologise for not coming. Anyway, that's my proposal. Can we have a vote on it, please?
Could you reiterate what you're proposing, please? Sorry.
The proposal is that aldermen and older women, or honorary aldermen and older women, should continue to be invited to civic events, but should not be invited as a matter of course to council meetings. But of course, should they attend the council meeting, they would always be welcome. And there will be no recording of apologies if they don't attend council events, council meetings. Does that sum that up, Eleanor?
Yeah, I must have missed something when I dropped out. So yeah, no, I agree with that. I do agree with that.
So I see the votes are up there. Did everybody have that?
Chair, that's six green ticks, no red crosses, no abstentions.
Thank you. So we now come to the last point on this. Relevant matters, and the matter that has been mooted is the provision of car parking permits. And I do know of an alderman who does come to Budley to have, I won't say whether it's a hairdresser's or a barber's, but does take advantage of the permit to come and park in Budley while hair is attended to. So I do have some sympathy with Councillor Miller's expedition, because for £100 they can buy a permit. Anyway.
Chair, you have Councillor Chapman, Councillor Parr, Councillor Davey, Councillor Allen, Councillor Rylance in that order.
And I will not vote on this because I don't know. I might be one of those affected come May 2023. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman's first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. No, I think car parking is fine. It's the only perk you get for working for years and years and years for your residents. Quite honestly, and sadly, we have lost quite a few aldermen, and there are some aldermen around at the moment that can't drive at the moment. And no, I think it would be a bit sad. Yeah, I understand it's money. There's not a lot of them driving around a lot. And like Tom says, there is one that goes into the barbers, and there is one in Exmouth that actually goes up and down to the hospital for treatment. But apart from that, doesn't go anywhere. So no, it's a bit mean, isn't it? Come on, they've put a lot of service in. And I don't think it's a lot to ask, to be quite honest. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Parr's next, Chair.
Yep, I agree. I don't think it would add up to a vast amount of money. I'd be interested to know how much it has cost to give a free car parking pass. I mean, I don't, as has been said, I don't suppose those aldermen are parking all day, every day in a prime car park. I very much doubt they cost this council very much, and I think it's just a nice gesture that they get that very small freedom to park. It's not very much, and I would think it should continue.
Has the chief executive gone?
No, he's there.
I'm just wondering, how is it administered? Is it down to the honorary alderman each year to apply for their parking permit, or because there's also
no, we have a list, and that list is rolled over, if you like, every year. And obviously, when the alderwoman's deceased, they're taken off the list.
What about changing card details?
They're normally pretty good at telling us quite quickly if they change their card details.
At last, a reason for having personalised plates.
Well, at least they're still around when you hear from them with a change of card details.
Yeah, well, I just wanted that clear. So it actually is incumbent upon the alderman to keep the council informed so that their permit is maintained.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Davey, next, Chair.
Thank you. Well, we may think we give great service, but that's not always the public perception of us as councillors. And I've heard any number of people, when I'm knocking on the doorstep, say to me instead, well, you're all in it for yourselves. And I'm sure we've all received that one at some point or another. Lots of people put in good service and don't expect any perks at the end of it. And I don't think it's mean to take it away. I appreciate it doesn't cost the council anything. But as a Green, I don't particularly want to be encouraging people to drive around in their cars anyway. So I will suggest an amendment. We'll make it free cycle parking instead.
Sorry, Chair, could I just come in?
Yes, certainly, Chief Executive.
If it helps, just in terms of the understanding, I mean, there was a time when there were quite a few civic events that the council held, particularly related around the folk festival. Older councillors will recall that the folk festival used to be held in the grounds of the Knoll. And so there were a lot of civic events held, if you like. I think when that ceased and the number of civic events basically boiled down to one or two, that's when the free parking permit came in, if you like, because there was a recognition that the council wasn't doing as much as it had done in previous years. So that was the thinking at the time as to why it was introduced, if that's helpful or not.
So it was a way of rewarding them when other rewards disappeared.
Yeah, essentially.
Councillor Allen, Chair.
All I want to say is I think we should leave it to the committee, the working group. If they want to be mean, that's up to them.
Councillor Rylance.
Thank you. So I wanted to suggest that we granddaddy out the scheme, that we stop awarding car parking passes to any new older people, and that we just leave the ones that are existing as they are. I mean, that seems quite fair to me, because at least everybody will be going into the scheme in the future, if it's decided to be retained, knowing exactly what to expect. And as Mark Williams has just pointed out, there are fewer and fewer civic events that people would be called upon to attend anyway. So, do they really need the parking? I mean,
Sorry, Eileen. I don't know. The point is, this parking permit to honorary alderman and alderwoman is not allied to only carrying out council business. It is just a
I understand that. I wouldn't remove it from the people who already have it. I'm just proposing that we don't give parking permits to any more future older people. That's my proposal.
That is an amendment to Ollie's proposal, is that it carries on. We carry on the perk for those who've already got it, but new appointees will not be afforded that privilege. Is that what you're saying? That's
what I'm saying, yeah.
So I think Chair Councillor Davies phrased his as an amendment, a slightly tongue-in-cheek amendment, I think. He phrased his as an amendment, but I don't think we had an original proposal, although both Councillor Chapman and Councillor Parr spoke in favour of continuing the pass, but I didn't, unless I missed it, I didn't hear a proposal at that stage. So if you're looking to pull something together, you had the two members who were in favour of continuing, Councillor Davey with cycle passes, and Councillor Rylance suggesting continuing the passes as existing, the grandfather rights, but ceasing for new members. So I think you can perhaps pull something together from that.
Now, constitutionally, does the first proposal be voted on first?
I would suggest, as we're all looking in the same direction with this, it's probably just working through to something that everybody agrees on. I don't think we need to overcomplicate it.
Well, the proposal is that the issuing of car parking permits to newly appointed aldermen and alderwomen should be discontinued, but that privilege should be allowed to continue for people given such appointments in the past. Can you make a sensible grammatical sentence out of that?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. And you have Councillor Davey and Councillor Parr to speak.
Chair, I just want to make it clear, I was not proposing taking it away from those who have it already. As far as I'm concerned, when an honour is or a privilege is being conferred on somebody, you can't retrospectively take that away. So I was only suggesting going forward in the future that whoever is proposed as honorary aldermen or alderwomen, and I would suggest using that phraseology, that the car parking isn't awarded in future. Of course, cycle parking is free anyway, so there's no need to put that one forward, and it was tongue-in-cheek, Anita, very much. But yeah.
So I think, Chair, you have that recommendation from Councillor Rylance, and I would suggest perhaps seconded by Councillor Davey if he's content to do that. And
we can vote or not, because if that vote is lost, it means that the alternative is the case, actually, isn't it? In a way.
We can revisit it, yes, Chair.
Yeah. So you've heard the proposition, which in simple terms is that newly appointed aldermen and alderwomen will not be given a car parking permit for life, but it will not be removed from those who already have been granted it. Can we have a show of hands on that, please?
So voting is underway. Chair, there are 3 green ticks and 2 red crosses.
And 2 abstentions. Well,
no, I don't see any abstentions.
Well, I abstain.
Sorry, there's 3 red crosses.
3 red crosses now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just gone up. Oh, so it's 3-3, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry. 3-3, Chair.
Well, I always think a chairman should, unless there are very, very strong feelings one way or the other, maintain the status quo. But it's something we could actually put to council to consider when they approve the whole scheme and go to whole council.
Certainly, Chair. So you'll be exercising your vote against the proposal?
Yes, but recommend that is included for a decision to be made by full council. But the recommendation of this council is that it continues. All right.
That's fine, Chair. So I think then it's just whether there is anything else that members would want to introduce at F, any more guidance members wish to give to council to give to the working group. You have Councillor Miller with his hand up.
Right, Paul.
Sorry to come in again, Chair. Final comment from me. Are we sure we want to continue calling Honorary Alderman, or should we be coming up with a more modern name, such as Honorary Citizen, as other councils do? I'm not fixed on the idea. It's just a suggestion that Councillor Bonetta came up with earlier. He's our youngest member of the council, and I do think, we have to make these awards. We have to evolve, and we have to make these awards relevant to people. Doesn't mean we don't respect our traditions and history, but time does move on, and I think alderman is a very arcane piece of language. So that would be my only further suggestion. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I made that note in my opening comments on this proposal that we should look at new terminology, and I think that is something that the newly formed working group can come up with.
Do you want to put that forward as a proposal, Chair?
Yes.
Or?
That the new working group be tasked with deciding on a suitable designation for people who are awarded what were previously known as the status of honorary alderman and alderwoman.
Certainly. Do you want to pop that through as a proposal so that it's
Yeah,
then
I'll put that as a proposal.
formally?
It's something I mentioned at the beginning. Can we have a vote on that then, that the working group be asked to come up with a more modern nomenclature? I won't get my word on that. A title more fitting to modern times.
Thank you. So the vote is underway. Chair, that's 6 green ticks, 1 red cross and no abstentions.
Thank you. I think, does that now close the alderman issue? I think it does, doesn't it?
Unless there's anything else anybody wants to add under F, then you've covered all of the questions, Chair.
The local plan sites allocations.
Chair, I'm very sorry to interrupt, Chair, but you haven't considered 4.2. That's to do with taking away an award of that honour, which I think we should have that opportunity to do so. Thank you, Chair. That's my recommendation.
So, Chair, a suggestion that there is a method to allow the removal of the honour as the Chief Exec sets out at 4.2.
And that decision shall be made by full council on the recommendations of the working group. Does that cover that? Happy with that, Mark?
Yes, happy with that.
Thank you.
Councillor Parr with her hand up, Chair.
Helen?
You're muted, Councillor Parr. Sorry.
Sorry. In the recent event, there was advice from Henry of the way it should be done, and because the person was conferred as alderman at full council, then that had to be removed at full council. So I think that system exists.
If I could help, Chair, I mean, I think the benefit of what Councillor Allen is saying is that it would be in the protocol, so it would be very clear that that this was something that the council would do in appropriate circumstances.
So you need a seconder, Chair.
Happy to second.
That's it then. All voted.
No, members are still voting. So 7 green ticks, Chair, no red crosses, no abstentions.
Thank you. Item 9 is a verbal update on the allocations delivery. Is that down with, who's that down to?
I've got that, Chair, from monitoring officer from Henry Gordon Lennox. So Henry's update is he's sorry he couldn't be here this evening. He had pre-existing plans. If the committee wishes to consider how the application was handled, and this related to the Goodmore's Farm discussion, if the committee wishes to consider how the application was handled and factors which influenced its processing, as well as considering whether the consultation that was carried out was suitable, then this is permissible. This would be from a discharge of function or service perspective, and with a view to potentially informing service improvement. What the committee cannot do is consider the planning merits of the application and the rationale for the grant of permission, as that would be out with the role of this scrutiny committee. The joint overview and scrutiny meeting of 7th of January 2022 recommended that there was a review of the statement of community involvement and consultation on planning applications to consider making greater use of site notices to publicise planning applications. And Henry suggests it may be sensible to consider the Goodmore's Farm as part of the work if the concern relates to the consultation specifically. So that's Henry's suggestion.
And I remember clearly Ed Freeman actually personally undertaking to carry out that review, but I don't want to lose sight of it. So can we put that on the forward plan, come up with something to review the processes of consultation and site notices? Is that something we can put on the forward plan?
I think you could do that, Chair, in accordance with the decision of the group joint overview and scrutiny meeting of 17th of January. So I think you could include that from there.
Is the committee happy with that? We will get another chance at it.
Could I just ask, Chair, if we should at the same time consider the mechanism of delegation?
I think, Chair, that would be for the planning committee itself or strategic planning to consider, if it's the scheme of delegation that Councillor Allen's referring to.
Why would it be not for scrutiny to have a view?
I think that's a planning issue. Mark perhaps may have a view on that. For me, that's not a scrutiny issue. Are you there, Mark?
It's a procedural issue.
I think the issue, Councillor Allen, would be if maybe you could actually put the proposal in writing and the reasons why you think it's appropriate, then we can analyse that in terms of what the Constitution says and what the appropriate form may be.
That's right. Thank you, Mark. So did we have a vote on this, bringing it back to the forward plan? Did we
I don't think you need to vote, Chair. I think you'd like it on the forward plan.
Thank you very much indeed. The performance report Q3. Is there anything there that raises any great concerns? I don't see any hands. Right.
Yes, Chair, Councillor Davey, Councillor Allen and Councillor Rylance and Councillor Parr and Councillor Chapman have their hands up now.
Can you call them in order then, please, Sarah?
Yes, Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I did click on the appendix, the service objectives report, I think it was. Oh yes, Appendix B. And I just want to say how impressed I am with the work that our officers and their teams are carrying out. I think it was salutary reading through that and seeing some of the work that is going on. And I would recommend any member of the public who wants to, kind of wonders where their council tax is going, to read through those service plans and just see sometimes the difficulties that they're struggling with, the work that they're carrying out, because I found it very heartening and made me very proud to be a councillor. So I just want that on record.
Thank you. And can that be minuted, please? And I think we all totally concur with you on that, Ollie. Who's next?
Councillor Allen.
To save trawling through all the detail, which of course we have specific interests in various parts of it, could it be brought to the main report if there are red flags, if there are things that, for example, there are 3 of them which are not working according to plan, just to make it a bit simpler to pick them up? Thank you.
Well, on that, Mike, I remember that there used to be explanations as to why things were doing better, why things were going along normally, and why there were concerns. That actually used to be an explanation in the days of Karen Jenkins of it was a much more detailed performance report. And can we, as a scrutiny committee, put that on the future plan for more information on the performance report?
Yeah, I mean, Chair, I'm only referring to the things that are going awry, and I just think we ought to have information about mitigation.
We certainly used to get that, so can we put that on the former forward plan, Anita?
Yep, certainly, Chair.
We want
have
more
that in.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just struggling to understand what's being said here. So if you look at page 60 of the agenda, there are 3 measures which are of concern. They're in red. We have given an explanation with regard to those. Are you saying that you want a fuller explanation, more of an explanation? I wasn't totally sure what exactly was being asked for. That was all.
No, I must apologise, actually, Mark. I remember it used to be, in a way, a much more pictorial and complicated document. But as you say, the measures in there about the temporary accommodation, sickness, absence and things are in there. So that information is in there. So I think we can accept that as being satisfactory. And thank you for pointing that out.
Chair, you have Councillor Rylance with her hand up.
Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I wanted to pay tribute to the staff and give thanks to them for doing their jobs in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And I know that many departments are very understaffed. So thank you so much for doing that. And I hope that the reds that we have aren't due to the fact that people are just so overstretched that things are getting past them. I did want to ask specifically about the planning, really, because I know that planning is very overworked as well. Is there any notion of whether our officers are making, quote unquote, the wrong decisions, or whether it's a background of changing case law behind the planning inspectorate's overturning of our decisions? Because I know that there is pressure, isn't there, from above to allow things more, and I just wonder whether that is.
So I did ask Ed Freeman about this one in one of my one-to-ones with him, and he highlighted the last sentence in the comment, which is that
we're coming up against hard. Thank you.
Sorry.
Carry on, Mark. Eleanor's dropping in.
Okay. So I did ask Ed Freeman about that, and he highlighted the last sentence in the comment, which is that the only trend that can be identified in the allowed appeals is a continued difficulty in defending appeals against the refusal of proposals for house extensions. So I think he would say this is probably a learning curve that the planning committee is on. And as we report back to the planning committee the results of appeals, then that's the way in which that particular indicator may see an improvement over time.
Thank you, Mark. And the other aspect is that some people might feel because we don't have enough appeals allowed, it means that we're being too too free with our applications. Other people, it's like taking cases to court, and if you get too many not guilty verdicts, you can be criticised. You get as many criticisms for not taking slightly dodgy cases to court. That's been my experience. But the other thing is, I know from my experience on planning that sometimes two inspectors will look at the same case and come to two totally different conclusions. Anyway, that is noted. So now do we move to the forward plan? The next thing is a meeting with South West Water. It's a great shame that we've only been granted an hour, but they are in a take it or leave it situation. We can't command them to attend. So all I ask is that we make the most use of that hour, are disciplined, and that we ask questions, which is why I've asked that questions and points are submitted to Sarah so we can collate them. And perhaps if there are a group of councillors all raising the same point, they come to some decision between them as to who should be the person to put it. Otherwise, we can be wasting time, which would be better spent. That's what I've got to say on that. Is there any move on when we can get the expenditure on consultants and agency staff?
Chair, I did ask. I haven't got a date for that yet, but I am still in contact with the officer concerned. He's going to let me know when they're able to bring that forward.
Thank you. And this Mid-Devon committee, there's an awful lot of problems caused by these anaerobic digesters, not least of all the movements of massive vehicles, damage into hedgerows, damage into verges, damage into brick walls, and damage into cars. And I think it's something that we do need to look at with more detail. So I don't know quite how we propose that with Mid-Devon. Is it a joint meeting we have, Sarah, because they suffer very much the same problems as we do?
I think they were looking for a joint discussion at some point, weren't they, Chair? I think the suggestion was that could happen after the May annual council meeting.
Are the committee happy with that? We can all go to Tiverton, or they can all come to Honiton. Because I think we'll actually be in the realm of real meetings then. I expect so.
Chair, Councillor Rylance and Councillor Davey have their hands up
yes,
to speak.
Yep. Ollie, you come first this time.
Okay, thank you. Just read the meeting with South West Water. I was going to suggest, will you be chairing that one?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that it might be a good idea if we send questions to you, because I suspect there'll be a lot of councillors wanting to get in 1 hour, and I think it might be a good idea if we submit questions to you in advance, so you can maybe collate them and make sure the same question isn't being asked in slightly different ways several times. We really need to make the best use of this hour. So would that be a suggestion?
That's what I said. And in fact, Sarah has already written emails to all members of this committee asking for questions. Am I right, Sarah?
Sorry.
Yes, that's correct. By 12 noon tomorrow,
I
please.
missed that.
You were obviously parking your bike somewhere, Ollie.
I think my brain was parked, yeah.
Eleanor's next.
Thank you. I really hope you can hear me, because this internet is terrible today. So I was wondering whether we might not be able to try and bring forward the AD question, because we're in the middle of revising our local plan, and I just actually think we need to have policies going forwards about the possible size of anaerobic digesters within our council area. And I'm just wondering, I'm just concerned that we're going to run up against deadlines for the local plan unless we can actually get all the information out of that we can sooner than that. So is there any chance that we could actually have the anaerobic digester meeting with Mid-Devon any sooner than June? Because I think we really need to talk about this a lot. It's quite a bad situation.
That's time, Des. But if something to do with the drawing up of the local plan, that's very much should be a matter for strategic planning.
Yeah, but if we need to get the information out and extract all the information that we can from the people that we can, then we need to do that before the local plan goes to any kind of formal approval process. And I know that's not going to be before the end of the year, but I'm just worried that if we wait until June to have this meeting, we're going to be running up against quite a lot of deadlines.
Anita?
I share your view, Chair, that I think that's a strategic planning issue. What about a recommendation from, can you recommend strategic plan, or a suggestion from this committee that, Chair, that you have a discussion with the Chair of Strategic Planning about how you could bring this matter forward in a way that doesn't impact the local plan timescale?
I will do that, because I know it's concerns I get from the parish councils, and it seems crazy. We're growing food crops to then throw into machines to produce energy. So yeah, I will. You'll have to nudge me. I will contact the chair of the strategic planning group for the impact of anaerobic digesters to be put on high on the agenda.
Chair, if I may, it's not every anaerobic digester, it's the industrial scale anaerobic digesters that we're more concerned about, because the concept of putting manure on a farm, or even from a neighbouring farm into an anaerobic digester on a farm, is not something I don't think anybody would have a problem with. But it's just the absolute scale of what's happening at the moment is just appalling, really. And I think we need to consider the size of any potential future development.
Well, especially as they were being strongly recommended by Countryfile the other Sunday.
I think small ones aren't a problem.
I will talk to strategic planning about it. Anything else of the forward plan? Right. Can I thank you all for a meeting? I know we've overrun a bit, but I think we thrashed out that Honorary Alderman thing very thoroughly. I think we will be recommended to council a very sensible and sustainable way forward. And I thank you all for your time and your good-natured participation in the discussion. Thank you.